millions of lives. He said, but there's no money in any of that, and
Oh no.
it's just absolutely frightening, it is just frightening, and do you have any thoughts? I mean, I know sometimes the pen is the greatest avenue we have, 'cause, and the internet is just, oh my God. What are some, because a lot of people think, what can we do? Can we tell we surely can't go to town hall meetings. That's all a sham, and I think we do need health care reform. Because, I've argued against health care reform until I realized I'm wrong. What we need health care reform is no vaccines, no drugs, get rid of the Ritalin, the Prozac, the Effexor, and all these drugs. It was said very well by Thomas Edison. If all the drugs are given to man, and this goes back 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, were thrown in the ocean, people would be a lot healthier, but God would have to save the fish.
Well, it may get there now. I mean, these psych drugs are showing up in drinking water in different cities. So, I mean, that's my other area of expertise. I mean, that's the other side of this, where all these psych drugs and these little kids with all these psych drugs and tell them they got mental disorders and stuff. My latest campaign is this great Mothers Act, screening all these pregnant women and for postpartum depression, but it's a ruse, because they're saying they're screening just for postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. But all this that's been set up over the last 8 years, they're going to screen them for all these mental disorders. And the point behind it is to prescribe these expensive drugs, which are expensive as all heck, And so that's what I've been working on, besides, the vaccines, which basically, I think the last article I even wrote on, well, I did write one recently. I did write one where it showed that kids that got the flu vaccine had, I think it was longer hospitalizations or whatever, more often than kids that didn't, for the flu. That was just recently. But I don't know what you're going to do about this vaccine business, because, I mean, it's so powerful. But then when I look at the profits behind it, oh, my God. It's just unbelievable.
See, I don't believe, and the doctor last night said something very, very good. He said their goal is not to kill us. It's not a mass euthanasia, because euthanasia, you can't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. The goal of these pharmaceuticals is to make everyone sick so that they can sell you all the other pharmaceuticals. And boy, it surely feels, it's like, usually when you find a simple answer, it's usually more correct than a complex answer.
Well, right. I mean, I did write back when I was writing about vaccines. I did write about saying, now all these vaccine-injured kids being treated with these psych drugs. Yes, it's a dream to these companies. I mean, and these poor parents having to pay for all this. I mean, when I investigated how much it costs and thought about for a parent to take a severely autistic child and raise them for life. I mean, it just tears my heart out to picture this. I mean, I cannot picture how this must be. I'm blessed. I have a 3.5-year-old grandson, is just the light of my life, and I'm telling you, if something like that happened to him, I just can't imagine.
Evie, I've got to tell you that I never really took care of any autistic children, didn't know very much, and then I decided I wanted to delve into it for a while, and for about 5 or 6 months, I was meeting families and talking to them. I've never done anything I've never been involved with something so depressing, and my heart goes out to every family. My daughter and my oldest daughter's a nurse, and she would see some of the families with us, and I would call my wife, and I'd say, gather as many of our children. We're blessed. We've got 10 grandchildren and 6 children. Most of them live in Chicago. And let's pray for half an hour before we eat dinner. Let's go somewhere, because I left so depressed and what a parent goes through, not every day, but every minute of their life. And my wife said something.
Right.
I'm asked to speak frequently at the autism conferences, and she said to me something very interesting. We were out in California at one of the conferences a couple weeks ago, and we went out to dinner, there was only one parent there because there was either the father or the mother, because the other one was taking care of their child. And how
right.
depressing is that, that you can't build a relationship as a husband and wife. I mean, these are the most dedicated. These are warriors. These are warriors, and
Yeah.
there's and I always ask the same question at every one of the conferences. What do you think caused this? And I don't believe. See, I believe that mothers and grandmothers always tell the truth. Only doctors doctor things up, you know. And it's always the same. My child is perfectly fine. They gave him a series of vaccines, and that was it. It's frightening. I mean, it's so frightening.
Oh, it is. It is. And when I first learned about this, I really expected to start hearing on the news where these kids were being killed. I'm not kidding you. I thought having a parent, I mean, the stress and everything from it, what it must drive parents to, and on the other hand, for a parent to watch their child suffer like this and know that it's never going to stop. I mean, I'm amazed that I haven't. I honest to God am.
I feel the same way. I mean, I have a low tolerance for lots of things,
Yeah.
and I just marvel at, I mean, look, we're only seeing the beginning of what's going to happen.
Right.
Wait till these children become teenagers, as is already happening. Because, see, this epidemic started around 1989, 1990, and you said it so well. My partner said the same thing. We're virtually a vaccine-free practice, but we weren't back in 1988 or 1989 or 1975.
Yeah.
The families who followed Dr. Mendelsohn were, but we always gave families choice. Always gave choice, and no one got multiple vaccines in one day. But my partner
Right.
said they can almost pinpoint the change. See, nothing has changed. Even if someone wants to get vaccines in our practice, we're still following a 1973 protocol. And I think you're so right, Evie, when you said that, that it's the multiple vaccines, as Generation Rescue has done so eloquently, and you just take a look at the two syringes, and the one
Oh, right.
the one on the right is growing. That's already a year or two old, just frightening. What kind of activism can we do? What's your thoughts? Should we be writing more? Should we be talking more? And that the whole goal of this webinar series is to really let more and more people know. And the reason why I think we're going to be successful in letting the public know about this, because the internet or the World Wide Web really makes it that no matter how much the government wants to shut things up, it doesn't work. We've got Twitter and Twooter.
Right, right.
So this is
Well, you know what happened with me? I sit here feeling guilty because it's like I haven't done that much about it. And I did feel like, that I wasn't successful in being able to do certainly what I wanted to do about it. But to tell you the truth, when I first started that, like I said, I had a day job, okay? So all this investigating and all this writing and stuff I did was on my own time, but I could afford it because I was, had a day job supporting me, But like when I quit Dayton Daily News, it's pure freelance that I've done since then. So any articles that I wrote after that were on my own time, but I didn't have a day job supporting me, So like now, I really can't because I've got to make a living and I've got to write my articles that I'm required to write to make a living. And I don't have time to do the investigation that it starts. But I did, when I'd have different jobs, I would try to stick in stuff, whenever I could. But I really can't get people to sponsor. Like, there's no newspapers. I'll tell you what. I did try this at first when I left Dayton Daily News and I started freelancing, setting up proposals for articles on vaccine and autism. There's not one biter. There's not one.
That's
you try to go up against these big advertisers, you're not going to get anybody to hire you to write these articles. I don't care if you sell them for peanuts. You're not going to get them.
That is so depressing. That's really depressing. I mean, that's...
and they do it the same with the psych drug stuff, too. anything to do with the pharmaceutical industry. They have taken over the mainstream media in this country. I mean, you don't have to think this ain't rocket science. Just watch the ads on TV on the cable channels. Just watch on the, the main TV channels, or watch in any magazines or anything else. And I can tell you how it works. That if there's a big story that's going to come out that, say it's going to be very embarrassing to a drug company, and there's harm being caused, I'll guarantee you they know that's coming out long before it is, and they'll pump enough money into advertising in the mainstream media presses, and that their budgets are dependent on it. And then when they know when that story comes out, the media does, that they'll publish that story once or twice, but they won't run it for a week like they should and alert people, because they know that drug company's going to pull that advertising million or whatever they threw them the week before right back if they do it. This is how it's done.
So scary. Well, there's one thing good about this recession, and now all of a sudden they announce it's over.
Yeah.
I mean, I found that was phenomenal. That was brilliant. But I tell you, there's one thing good about this recession. As we become poorer and poorer, every one of us, as our net worth becomes less than zero, all of a sudden you don't have a lot to protect anymore. Now you got to protect your family and your children. And that's why I think we're going to see more and more activism in a sense right now, because, the one mistake they're making, and the president's making a big mistake here, he doesn't realize that doctors always made a good living, worked very hard. I mean, most doctors, including myself, work well over 100 hours a week. I mean, so, their income didn't even compare to plumbers, but now the doctors' incomes are dropping. All of a sudden, one day, they're going to say, oh, my God, I don't have to say what I've been saying, even conscious or unconscious. And they're going to say, let me take a look. I'm going to read what Evelyn Pringle is writing about. I'm going to read what Dan Olmsted, An Age of Autism. I'm going to read about that because I have nothing to lose anymore. And I find that exciting. I mean, in a frightening way, I find it very, very exciting, I think the bottom line is every one of us does a little bit. And I really think it's possible that this swine flu vaccine may be their downfall, because they've just done such a big number on it, and now they're threatening everyone. My wife just told me that 2 people died in San Diego, who were perfectly healthy from the swine flu. Well, what they failed to tell you, that 100 people died in San Diego over the weekend from car accidents. That they don't tell you. And yet I don't see any changes there. And so no, you've done.
Well, this swine flu thing, I haven't been following it, but I was reading a little bit on your website earlier, and what you were talking about, and I was watching one of your question and answer webinars on it, and I'll tell you, this swine flu BS is what I call it. That I got an email somebody sent me where they said something about they were saying how it could get so bad they'd come to your door and stuff, And I wrote back, just I do these one-liners and emails I get, and I wrote back and said, well, that is going to be the time that I have to remember my constitutional right to bear arms. And they show up at my door with my little 3.5-year grandson here.
Well,
they're not putting that in.
Go ahead.
I'm not getting it. He's not getting it. Nobody's getting it in my family.
Let me tell you something. I've never carried a gun in my life, never handled a gun in my life, not because I'm the most pacifist person in the world, because I was blessed to really grow up in this country where you didn't have to carry a gun. I have 2 brothers who live in Israel, and they're rabbis, very religious, and they have guns. They carry guns, And all of a sudden, I said to my wife, I'm understanding what some of these fundamentalists in this country, I'm trying to think the right words for it, all of a sudden, I'm starting to realize that there is a First Amendment. I went to law school. I understood it, but and there is a Second Amendment, and we do have a right to bear arms. I want to know how frightening it is that the Supreme Court judge, who was just put into becoming a Supreme Court judge, she has her own interpretation of the Constitution. Her concept of right to bear arms is the government has a right to bear arms. That's so frightening.
Oh.
And I mean, that is so frightening, to think that we put someone in who putting a vaccine into your child is essentially bearing arms, just like you said. And this is one of the reasons they say, because the government is giving you the power as a doctor, as a nurse, to bear arms against our children. How frightening.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's not happening in my house. I mean, it's not happening to him, period. He's not getting any vaccines, and